Badasses in Tech is brought to you by Growth Stack Media, an integrated communication and content agency. If you're looking to scale your business affordably through public relations, video production, or podcasting, we've got you covered. Visit growthstackmedia.com to get in touch today. All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Badasses in Tech. Today, I'm joined by Michael O'Connor, a true badass. He has a background spanning in gaming, film production, executive leadership. Mike is currently co-founder and CEO of Mr. Kite, developing a brand new simulation game as well as an award-winning VR experience. Prior to this, Mike oversaw production teams as well as successful releases at companies like Sports Interactive, Nintendo, many others. Mike, welcome to the show. I tried to hit the highlights, but let me know if I left anything out.
No, that's super cool. Thank you so much. It's great to be here and to chat to you. So yeah, pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah. And before we jump in, I always like to start off asking my guests really what they believe led them to where they are today. So can you open up a little bit with some background about what you believe kind of got you started in this field and what got you passionate about production?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background, if I go a bit further back than I usually care to go, I was a music student actually. So I was playing drums, and I always loved, one of the things I always loved when I was playing drums was I loved like kind of being the backbone supporting the band. So, but then you'd have like lead guitarists who could play like kind of, or lead singers who would take the kind of limelight. But I always quite enjoyed facilitating the creativity of others, I think, Unfortunately, I just wasn't good enough drummer, so I had to pivot careers. And I worked in film production for a while, and then I went and studied a master's in game design, and that was my kind of entry into the games world. And I knew I wanted to be a producer at that time. So I joined Nintendo. I kind of got lucky on a job. They were looking for someone who understood sound and audio and music. So it was a kind of it was a pretty lucky shot, I'd say. And yeah, it was a pretty cool opportunity as well. I got to work on some great games as a producer, learn my trade there about video games, moved across to Sports Interactive. And that went from, I suppose, the kind of amazing corporate nature of Nintendo. It was a very different situation in Sports Interactive, but you were in the trenches of game development, and like everything that we did mattered. Whereas when you're working at a massive corporation, let's be honest, not everything you do really matters. It's like you're kind of more like a cog in a wheel. So that was cool, and that kind of got my that definitely got my attention. Being able to really impact projects like that, design focused, being able to think about the emotions that players were having when they were playing the games that we were making. And ultimately that is one of the reasons I ended up starting my own business.
Well, there you go. And it all started from what you're saying was a failure of being a good drummer, but really the fact that you took that, it wasn't a failure. It was like, wait a second, I love this. I love being in this space. I may not be the next best drummer, but how can I apply this passion and what I'm good at to a different career or a different lane? So I love that story about that pivot. And I just want to double click into your Nintendo story a bit. I mean, you're saying that you got lucky, but I could imagine there's a lot of listeners out there who maybe they have this aspiration to join a very well-known company. I mean, what were some of the exercises, or what were some of the kind of practical steps that you took to even put yourself in front of a company like Nintendo and even, Sports Interactive as well? Can you talk a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, when I wanted to go to game production, I kind of knew that I needed to have something. I didn't really have anything at that point in terms of like, I'd produced some kind of small kind of feature films in Ireland. The rest of my time, I think I was like 25. Up to that point, I'd just been playing music, which doesn't exactly stand up to huge amounts of rigor on like a corporate CB job, right? So, so yeah, I needed to come up with an angle. really, there was no secret to it. It was like a kind of a painful experience in some way. It was like I applied to like hundreds of jobs as
Yeah.
a game producer, and just like everyone told me, no, you need to get experience, you know. And I was like,
Mm,
well, you know, I can go, and I'm really passionate about this, and I'm knowledgeable, and I've got a master's and stuff like that. And
right.
you know, honestly, I don't know how many games company I applied to, but like all of them. I applied to all of them, and then it was one of those moments. It was like 3 months later. It was probably one of the darkest moments of my life. I
I
remember I was
bet.
like, first time dealing with the fact that like I can't just like a sincere challenge. Like, have I wasted my time going back to college
Yeah.
just for a couple of years? You know, and dealing with rejection every day is tough, right?
Mhm.
Like you wake up and people are like, no, we don't want you. That's tough to hear all the time. You know, it starts breaking you down.
Yeah.
But I guess you just got to keep going, and you got to find a way to keep writing those emails, keep copying and pasting whatever those things, keep trying to
Hmm.
formulate your cover letter, all that kind of thing. And then, yeah, took a few months, but eventually then there was a little kind of crack, and a few people were like, "Oh, well, hold on, we'd like to learn more." And then it was kind of like when it rains, it pours. Then all of a sudden, like three
Sure.
or four job interviews, or three or four like offers came in for a job, and they were all from like the best games companies in the world.
Yeah.
And that it was just like it was kind of unbelievable because for the preceding months, everyone had told me I wasn't good enough, you know. So yeah, that was really the journey, and I suppose, you know, having that kind of background in music and
Yeah.
stuff like that was quite niche, right? There's not many people who've got that kind of niche background of like music plus, you know, and sound engineering and stuff like that, plus video games. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's how it worked out.
So I mean that, yeah, I could imagine dealing with the rejection, probably just getting like angry at the rejection. And that's almost fueling you to keep pushing, to keep going, to try different ways to package up your unique mix of skills and background. So, no, I think that's great advice and something that a lot of us are dealing with every single day, whether it's career related or not. So, round of applause to that. I mean, especially as you're sitting here now, you're managing and owning your own gaming company. I'm sure the younger version of yourself is super proud. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about your current state and maybe how some of those trials and tribulations and definitely your experience going from corporate and now again kind of your own independent studio. How do you feel all of those experiences have made you the leader and the producer that you are today?
Um, yeah, I think that for me going to Nintendo when I was in my kind of, I guess, mid-20s was probably a good, like going into that corporate atmosphere was probably a good thing because it was it was Nintendo of Europe and it was in Germany and it was methodical and um there was a lot of procedures to learn.
Right.
And at that time in my life, that was just a pretty good thing for me, you know?
Yeah.
It's a bit, like about a year before, I was like touring around like India with my friends with bottles of whiskey. You
Right.
know? So having that kind of, putting that kind of structure on me helped, I suppose, you know? And going into like technical project management
Right.
and thinking about organization. And there's an amazing guy actually there who has since left, a guy called Jan Hennig, who was a bit of a mentor for me, who he also moonlighted as like, well, he's the godfather of drum and bass in Germany.
Mm,
He was also like the lead producer at Nintendo at the time in Germany. So there was just, I think it was an opportunity for me to kind of add some organization to
sure.
my life, which was really useful. But there became a point where that level of standardized procedure became not as fun, I would say, for
Yeah.
me. I was like, you know what? I had ideas where we could like reduce the budget, where we could be
Yeah.
more efficient, where we could come up with ways to do things that were maybe more fun for players or marketing teams or whatever. And but it was always like, nah, don't rock the boat, don't rock the boat, you know.
Right.
So
Right.
out of the point where I was kind of like, you know, I need to be in a smaller company where I feel I can have more impact. And
Sure.
around that time, Football Manager, the creators of Football Manager Sports Interactive, they were looking for somebody. I had been in touch with them. I think I'd like written an email to them like every week for about like 2 years, just going like, hey, if anything ever comes up.
There you go.
And yeah, like I just never left those people alone. And then eventually, like one of the guys got back to me. He was like, okay, fine, let's have a conversation. And yeah, and that was a cool experience. I've been like, although I went across to another massive studio owned by Sega,
Yeah.
I was in a team whereby I was really impacting the team and the decisions, everything mattered. And if I made a mistake, things could go tremendously wrong. And I did make a mistake, and things did happen. And we dealt with the imperfection of game development. But for me, it felt more fluid being in the trenches like that.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And so fast forward to now, I know that there's been some exciting developments recently. I'd love for you to talk again about not only what we're dealing with today, but also how you were able to translate the corporate, the structure, being that, let's say, big fish on a small team, maximizing the impact. Like how did you continue translating all of those learnings and experiences to what we've been announcing recently?
Yeah. So I set up the company with my co-founder, Ben Cleary, who comes from a film background. He won an Oscar in 2017. He's a friend of mine for like 30 years. And we were always really passionate, like, from our younger days about how we could use emerging technologies to tell new types of stories, to be able to create new types of virtual worlds. And that kind of led us to creating our company, which is the team that's building today. So one thing that excites me, broadly speaking, is what the impact of really smart non-player characters. What do AI characters look like in the future of games? My belief is that the future is already here, and we're already able to start building emotional connections with AI characters inside of video games. And that's something that we're kind of building, I suppose, right? We're focusing on the development of a technology that will enable people to have really profound relationships and discussions with AI characters inside of today our social simulation game. So building a team to put that together has been fun. It's like I've built many teams before, but this was different in the sense that we needed to recruit a lot of people from academia, from research, from a lot of PhDs we had to bring over, because we were doing something genuinely new, genuinely innovative. We couldn't just, there was no book, right? There's no book. Like, I was just figure it out. So yeah, we had to go through the whole gauntlet of raising capital and putting together a team from zero up to what is now a team of 50.
Hey everyone, hope you're enjoying the episode so far. If you haven't already, why don't you take a second to click follow or subscribe on the platform you're tuning into so that you won't miss a second of Badasses in Tech. Also, if you're really loving what you're hearing today, why don't you drop us a 5-star review or leave us a positive comment, as it really helps the podcast grow and helps us continue doing what we're doing, which is helping people become a badass. That's amazing. Now, tell me a little bit about today. I mean, I dabble in games, and in terms of the AI kind of interactions, I'm thinking about some of my experiences with Spotify's DJ, for example, or now Instagram, they have like AI characters that you can DM with. So I'd love to just kind of get a better understanding of what today is like.
Sure.
Yeah.
So today's a game in which you're able to design and build your own virtual worlds. So you're going to use generative AI to be able to create architecture and interior design. So you'll generate these beautiful 3D things, and then you'll basically design your world that way. It's quite liberating from a creative perspective, quite fun. I think it's pretty chilled as well. It's super chill. Like, you're just like designing these beautiful places.
Yeah.
But you're not just designing these beautiful places alone. You're also creating a community of AI NPCs that are living in those spaces. These are non-player characters. And these are like the difference between characters inside of games before and after AI is significant. Before, inside of games, you would have like multiple choice answers to communicate. Now we get natural discussions just the same way as we're having a discussion right now. And, you know, those discussions can get pretty profound and pretty interesting. One of the things that helps us stand out from a technological perspective that kind of differentiates us, say, from some of the chatbots that you mentioned a moment ago, is our NPCs have very deep and rich personalities that have been cultivated, I would say, by Ben, my co-founder, who's an amazing writer. Also, they've got contextual awareness of their surroundings. So they walk around the game world, and when things change, they see the changes and they respond to it. So let's say, for example, like somewhere you're like, hey, I'm going to put this amazing house beside the beach, and because I think it's going to look really cool in my world. But then an NPC, you know, called like Freddy or whatever, comes up and says, hey, Summer, I wish you didn't put that there because that's kind of blocking my view. I just live down the other side of the beach, and that's where the moonlight hits, and it's most beautiful. And you're like, oh, yeah, I should change that. So they understand what's happening inside the world.
Wow.
They remember things. They've got long-term memory. So if you say that something to them like 6 months ago, they might bring it up. They're like, hey, do you remember you told me about that, how you really always wanted a house by the beach? So you're able to create these long-term relationships with these beings. And it's quite profound and interesting. So the technology that we have built to do that is called Dreamia. And Dreamia is this really powerful AI character engine that we believe is the future of storytelling inside of video games.
My mind is blown. And now that you're talking, I'm thinking about that movie with Ryan Reynolds, I believe. I think it's literally called Game Over. Do you know that one?
Oh, yeah, I do. Is it the one where he's in this kind of world and he's an NPC in the world himself?
Yes.
Yeah,
and he's like trying to, I mean, and as you were describing how they're like having relationships and conversations and keeping the contextual history. So, you know, is that the game? And is it really just to allow folks to speak with these deep players, or are other real life members able to connect with themselves as well?
Yeah, so the way that the kind of thing that you do inside of the game is you'll go to your island, and you're the owner and controller of that island. In some sense, you're like a mixture between like the god of the island, but also like village elder, because you're kind of you're there on the floor with them, right? So one of the first things you're going to always do is you're going to find residents, that's the AI NPCs who live on the island, and you're going to speak to them. And you're just going to be like, hey, how's everything going? What's up with you? And the residents are going to have a number of needs and desires that they're going to communicate to you. They might say something about their home. They might say something about their fashion. They might say something about relationships, or maybe their purpose and their jobs and their roles in society. So using these types of needs, it creates lots of different fun gameplay opportunities. And by interacting with them and by taking on missions or quests, make them happier.
Okay. I definitely want to sign up for this. I definitely want to have a crack at this game. This sounds like a lot of fun. And it also makes me excited and a little scared about the future and how some of these maybe gaming concepts and just all of the learning, you know, how do you see it in the future, and how do you see it maybe being applied to other realms or films or, you know, marketing, conferences? Like my mind is going in all different directions. So I'd love your take on where you see this technology in general going from here.
Well, look, AI is the game-changing technology of the modern age. I think it's as important, or arguably even more important, than the emergence of the internet. So we saw the impact the internet has had on society. It's totally reshaped society and reshaped, you know, civilization in many ways. I believe that the power of AI is as significant. And of course, with something so powerful, there are multiple ways it can go. right? And, you know, there are bad things that we need to be careful with, right? I mean, the same way with the internet, when people invented social media,
Right.
so people could connect across college campuses, they didn't expect that democracy itself was going to be under threat as a result of their innovation 20 years later, right?
Right.
So the impact of social media has had a lot of systemic challenges that have
Right.
been troublesome. Overarching, I think most people would accept, though, that the internet has been a very positive innovation for humanity, broadly speaking.
Definitely. Yeah.
Access to knowledge and education and connecting people across the world and all of the amazing things that happen as a result of it. Like probably the most important thing since the printing press and books were invented, right? Or books were published en masse. So I think that AI has the capacity for this type of civilizational change. And, you know, I'm certainly engaged in trying to find the most interesting and fun, positive benefits that AI can have for us, in particular in creating positive, holistic relationships in virtual worlds with really interesting characters defined by incredible stories. I think that's a compelling and just a really fun thing to both build and to play. Of course, we need to be careful, right? We need to be careful that we don't, you know, lose control of AI. Of course, it's something that's like the sci-fi challenge, you know, the kind of sci-fi trope that we constantly deal with. But overarchingly, I think that it's a massively positive innovation.
I think so too. And just thinking about what you said at the start of our conversation, you know, your passion to really help bring different characters to life. And I think a positive of this game and having such rich AI characters, almost teaching people how to respond or how to engage that. There's, especially with the pandemic, like, as much as I love to talk to people, sometimes I don't necessarily know exactly what to say, or I feel, you know, how do I combat this particular question? So I could see where AI in this particular game, with the rich context and all of the dimension that these AI characters have, that maybe somebody who's playing can learn a little bit about interpersonal relationships or how to communicate appropriately. So yeah, I definitely see, you know, your positive outlook, as well, with tied to that passion that you have of really just trying to bring characters alive, whether they're not real or helping us become better, improving our character as people and as a society. So
yeah,
I
that's really
like
interesting.
that.
That's really interesting. You kind of touch on some kind of aspects that I often think about as well.
Yeah.
Just the kind of like the nature of emotional
Right.
intelligence and empathy and being able to understand situations that
Yeah.
you're in and what other people are feeling in those particular situations. We've gone to great lengths to build inside of Dreamia, the AI character engine that we're building.
Yeah.
We've gone to great lengths to try to imbue emotional intelligence into these characters.
Yeah.
So, for example, so when you're speaking to them, they can use their long-term memory to understand things that may be happening in your life. You can speak to them about, you know, oh, I'm just a bit lonely at the moment or something like
Right.
that. So they can speak back to you and discuss some of those things, obviously not in any kind of professional medical advice
Right.
way, but you know, they can even listen to you and hear specific things and understand potentially some of the emotions that you're feeling at the time. That, like,
Yeah.
you go in one day and you're like, hey, great to be here. And you go in the next day and you're kind of like, hey, just checking in. Then you're like,
Yeah.
hey, what's up? Is something wrong with you today?
Mm-hmm.
So having that ability to kind of for the characters to have that level of emotional intelligence is really fun, really interesting. And I think that it could be a very positive addition to virtual worlds.
I completely agree. I mean, I can only speak for myself, but I love reality TV. You know, I learn a lot from watching people on my favorite Netflix show or Bravo show, like hash out an issue or solve a problem together. Now, is that the best source of, you know, education in that way? Probably not. So having other opportunities through games, even, you know, it almost allows the game to be more than just a game. It's it's a place to find a friend. It's a place to learn emotional intelligence and all of those things. So yeah, again, I definitely just want to sign up for this game even more and more when we talk about it. So, and I'm sure everyone listening will also want to do the same. Before we round up, I have one or two more questions for you, Mike. So, we're talking a lot about all of the different components and all of the different maybe teams or skills that are needed to, whether it's bring one game to life or whether it's completely go on your own and create your own production studio or your own kind of team. For those who are interested in pursuing careers in this field, what are some trends that you see that these individuals might need to maybe get super smart on, or as they're going through hundreds of interviews and applying for all of these jobs, what are some of those traits and skills that they should be putting to the top?
So, yeah, that's a great question. I think that there's never been a lower barrier to entry into the creative fields, in particular things like games. I mean, you could argue a number of different types of media. I think there's never been a lower barrier to entry because some of the technical skills that are required in order to go into these types of industries, well, sometimes you don't need to. Let me put it this way: There's ways of making amazing art these days without having to learn how to literally paint with a paintbrush. Same goes for music, right? People are able to go into music now and use all different types of software. The barrier to entry into games is plummeting. So there's so many different ways of making games these days. Unity, Unreal Engine. You're able to use things like ChatGPT to help you code. So I think that one of the kind of big pieces of advice from a practical perspective for people who are looking at this type of a change is to use all of the tools available to skill up fast, and using things like ChatGPT, being able to work with, like, let's call it the world's greatest creative assistant, right? Having this world's greatest creative assistant beside you is so massive. People just didn't have that before, So before going into an interview with Nintendo when I was 25, I knew that they were going to quiz me on some sound engineering concepts, but I didn't really know a lot about sound engineering because I was a drummer. I was focusing on that. I rang my friend and I was like, what are the core concepts I need to learn? And I wrote them down and I learned them off by heart and I waited for the question and then I hit the question. Okay. Right now, like, not everyone has a sound engineer mate.
Yeah,
right?
I definitely don't.
Right. But everyone's got ChatGPT,
Yeah.
and I can go and ask ChatGPT, what are the 4 concepts that are going to come up in this interview that I just have to know? So there's a lot of shortcuts out there for people who are trying to skill up in their knowledge base.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that using the available tools to be as productive as possible is really one of the best hacks that you have out there right now.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that. And I think when it relates to ChatGPT and some of those kind of shortcut tools, I feel like kind of what you said, you can't have ChatGPT do the interview for you or ace the interview for you, but you have to kind of take a beat and think through, okay, what could they ask me in this interview? Or, I have to do a little bit of my own research, a little bit of my own digging to then soundboard with this kind of expert best friend that's sitting on my desktop. So I think that's a great distinction of, ChatGPT, these tools are not meant to replace us by any means. They're really here to help us, but we still have to do our due diligence, especially as maybe young professionals or maybe those who are still students looking to break into the industry. You still want to use your brain and think through what could be, kind of forecast the different scenarios. And I think going back to the top is what you were saying, like really tapping into your passions and what you know about, and how can you maybe use ChatGPT to put all of those traits and quirks together and help you understand what part of this industry do you want to pursue. Because it sounds like there's a ton of different avenues around the creative or the sound or the writing, the technology. I don't know. Are there any other avenues that are worth mentioning for those that may know they want to be in gaming but aren't quite sure the paths that's available for them?
I think one of the best things you can do if you want to be in gaming is find a way to make a game. You know, these days it's no, I don't want to say easy, but the barrier to entry to one person making a game like Tetris or something like that, right? Yeah. It's like you can do that. Like you can, even if you don't know how to code, you know, even if you've got some ideas in your head, there's ways that you can explore those things. I think that for folks who are in the games industry, really what people are looking for is, especially with juniors, is that initiative, right? That initiative, you know, it's like, hey, listen, I've got a portfolio piece here. You know, I don't know exactly how to make games, but I made this one. And I think that says a lot, you know, and what we look for people who are coming in is, especially folks who aren't in like leadership positions, but are in more junior positions and transferring across, we're looking for that level of intuition and that attitude that like, I'm doing this and there ain't nothing that's going to stop me and I'm going to find a way. And if people are able to communicate that, I think, you know, because you can learn the skills, but that attitude, showcasing that attitude says something that's big.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Like running to the ball, literally taking no for an answer and not being afraid to try it and maybe fail. Because like we learned from you, your failure was nothing, not even close to a failure. You know, your failure of being a drummer, it just pushed you into this wonderful path.
If you hear me drumming, you might change your mind and be like, you're actually 100% a failure in drumming.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. I'll take your word for it. Well, Mike, it's been a pleasure. And before we go, I'd love for you to share a little bit more about where our listeners can check out today and where our listeners can connect with you if they were interested in having a conversation.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So come check us out on Twitter, Today the Game. That's probably the best place to see what we're building. We've got a community of 250,000 people who are following us on the game right there. But we have a policy of always writing back to anyone who writes to us on Twitter. So if you want to drop us a message on Twitter, we assure you that we're going to get back to you. That's probably the best place. If you want to go a little bit deeper into what we're doing, Discord is the place.
Great.
Again, Today the Game, you'll find our Discord server there. And come follow us. We've got lots of cool things happening recently. Well, you know, Dreamia has been announced, which is really cool. And there's going to be all sorts of opportunities to play Today the Game over the next period. And Summer, I hope to get you a build as well, so you can have an interesting conversation with some of the characters that we've been building.
I'm down. I'm ready for it. And maybe whoever's listening out there might pitch you an idea for your next award-winning game. So I'm happy to be part of this. And Mike, thank you again for your time. We look forward to the next time.
Nice one. Thanks so much.
Badasses in Tech is brought to you by Growth Stack Media, an integrated communication and content agency. If you're looking to scale your business affordably through public relations, video production, or podcasting, we've got you covered. Visit growthstackmedia.com to get in touch today.